Vitali would like to talk about if there is an infinite universe where there are possibilities if there is an afterlife. Vitali, first of all and most importantly, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's Vitali.
Vitali. Okay.
That's kind of the root, yes.
Perfect.
No
well, thanks
problem.
for
Sorry
calling,
about
Vitali.
that.
What's that?
I was just saying thanks for calling, but I'm Southern, so I said it Vitali.
That's okay. I heard all the different variations, so I'm used to it. Well, first, I just wanted to say I'm a fan of your show. I've been listening for a few years. It's definitely opened my, I used to be religious at a certain point, and then I had a bit of a crisis of faith, I guess.
Yes.
Somebody showed me like a mathematical formula, and anyways, that's a separate discussion. But I kind of had the main one was about the infinite universe thing, but I had two other things that are very small if I could get to them too, because one of them is just an anecdote and the other is a contradiction in the Bible.
Well, let's hit your main one first, and then we'll see how we go. And if we've got time for the other two, we'll kind of come back to them.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is kind of an interesting idea I had. So I've been reading about the origin of the universe and how there's the multiverse theory and possibly a cyclical universe theory where the Big Bang just happens over and over again. Or if there's we don't actually know how big the universe is, it could potentially be infinite. And again, we don't know this for certain, but let's just pretend that it could be. And so if it is indeed, if there is some form of infinity or eternity, then doesn't the law of probability dictate infinite possibility? Which means anything that is logically possible is happening or has already happened. And if every possibility has happened, then that means us, the individual, has a possibility of being reborn with our experiences. But furthermore, that also means that we will experience all logical possibilities infinite amount of times. Would you say
what makes you think being reborn is a logical possibility?
Well, if we are all made of that, probability, the probability of us existing happened, right? We're just a bunch of atoms that came together and then emergence formed and our consciousness came to be. So we know for a fact that us existing is a logical possibility, correct?
Yeah, we exist, as individuals, yes. But what makes you think that we can be reborn specifically?
Well, I guess it goes into a deeper question of what makes us us. But isn't it if everything in the universe is made out of matter, right? Atoms, our memories are still chemicals which are broken down to quarks. Couldn't they, in an infinite amount of time, be reassembled through chance?
I don't know, and I don't know what you mean by this. This is going to be one of them calls, I'm afraid, where I'm going to keep asking you questions on questions about what you've raised. It depends what you mean by chance. This is a word that a lot of theists use. They say, the atheists, and I know you're not a theist, but a lot of theists will say atheists think the universe came together by chance. And that is a misuse of the common meaning of chance. So it's really important that you define your terms when you're using words like chance to tell us exactly what you mean by that.
Well, and can I give a response and you tell me if I'm not answering the question at all or if I'm helping in any way, and that'll help me kind of more better understand the question. If I understand what you're saying or what you're asking, I would probably give the same response that I would give to most other theories and questions and opportunities of kind of thought expansion. And I would say, if science backed up such a thing, I would believe it. If science showed evidence of some kind of reincarnation, recreation, rebirth, revisit of some kind, I would believe it when presented with the evidence. But as things stand now, I don't see evidence to support that idea or that thought. Is that helpful?
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'm in the same position. I just thought it was an interesting idea to think about, because I mean, this kind of stemmed from something I heard before, where if you give like 1 million monkeys a typewriter and you give them an infinite amount of time, they'll eventually write all of Shakespeare just by slapping their hands on the typewriter.
But I also don't think that's true. I trust me, as somebody who's worked in education, you can give as many monkeys a typewriter as you want and they will still plagiarize.
Well, I guess there's no real way to know, but I just assumed that, like, law of probability. I mean, if infinity exists or eternity, but
again, this depends what infinity or eternity is, or the multiverse, because there's so many kind of inbuilt kind of what ifs in your question that it's and I'm genuinely not trying to be difficult, but I think no. There's so much stuff inbuilt into it that we really have to examine like what we're talking about, because when we're talking just about the multiverse, there's a Swedish physicist called Max Tegmark, I think it's Max Tegmark, who kind of came up with these different ideas, these different levels of what the multiverse is or what the multiverse could be, and then the least likely of those is that the kind of that we have entirely separate universes where the fabric of the universe itself is kind of different physics, which probably more akin to what philosophers would call many worlds. That in Tegmark's kind of levels of multiverses is the least likely. It's it's the most out there, and it has no evidence to suggest that it's even possible. Whereas some of his other ideas about the multiverse, which are kind of vary, some of them are like little bubbles which contain our own universe and then expand and become their own universes. It's all fascinating subject we've not got time for here. But if you have a look into his different levels of the multiverse, they're not what we kind of think of as a multiverse. And there's all these different things to take into account when we're asking ourselves questions like this. And this is why philosophy is so beautiful, because it's not just a case of, often on these shows you get kind of philosophy simplified and in a lot of ways nullified, a lot of the arguments that are presented. But it's so fascinating because it's so important to know exactly what you're talking about, to define it correctly, to really get into it. So, and this is a great kind of lesson for everybody listening. So it's a really helpful call, this, to actually, when you're thinking about these things, when you're thinking about something, which appears to be such a simple, I'm getting that excited, I can't even speak. When you think about something that is on the surface of it, appears to be a really simple question, when we really dig down into it, there are so many facets to it that it's not just as easy as saying, well, what if this and what if that? Because there's lots and lots of things to consider in these on the surface simple questions.
I mean, I agree. Like, again, this was just a thought experiment I had, and I just wanted to see if it kind of, based off what we know so far, would it actually have made sense? And it doesn't really particularly require the multiverse, because I know, for an example, the scientist Roger Penrose, he's very a big supporter of the cyclical universe, which means that the Big Bang happens, and then eventually, like, the universe will kind of retract into the Big Bang and happen again an infinite amount of times. And then again, there's also, we don't know how big the universe is. There could be infinite amount of galaxies and stars out there. So it's just a thought I had.
Yeah, I mean, if science backs it up, I believe it. If science says it's not a thing or they don't know, then I say it's not a thing or I don't know. That's my simple Southern-fied response.
And we're certainly not trying to dismiss you.
No, not at all.
It's a
Not at all.
really, it's a good question to bring up, and because these things are so important, I think, to kind of get into and delve into and look into it. But again, for fear of repeating myself, it shows how much thought goes into a thought experiment.
Right. And my master's was in writing, so that's all I have to say about something this deep is just, I don't know, science backs it up, then I agree.
What is your opinion on your own question?
What's that?
What's your opinion on your own question? What do you think is the answer to this thought experiment?
I mean, again, I'm agnostic to it. The way I would say is, I don't know, just like anything else, but I would like for this to be the case.
Yeah. Oh, why would you? What would the benefit of that being the case be?
Well, I guess part of me likes the idea of not non-existing after I die.
That's true. Hey, I
the idea
agree.
of experiencing. Yeah, and I think this is like again, I'm not like a scientist, but logically speaking, it sounds like a possibility. I guess if you're trying to use science or not religion, so it kind of gives me some hope in a sense.
I mean, even if you are trying to use religion, it makes just about as much sense as anything else that's proposed on that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, all humans came from Adam and Eve. Well, then this is also just as believable as a hypothesis.
Yeah, and remember that there are some religious groups that do think that we have a cyclical universe.
That's true. That's true. As long as I don't wind up in Nashville every time, that's fine with me. I hate this place.
Well, if there's time, is it all right if I get to the other two things?
Hit us with one really quick, and then we'll see how much time we've got, because we have got quite a few callers on the line.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll do the anecdote then. So I hear a lot of this kind of argument about how, because every culture has like a version of God or an afterlife or something, that must mean something like must exist. And I hear this argument pretty frequently, and I experienced something that kind of puts a wrench into that whole argument. So I'm trying to write a book, and I developed this magic system, and it was very articulate. I called it weaving, and then years later, I read the Wheel of Time, and guess what? It had the exact same magic system with the exact same name. And not only that, but there was also another example of me creating this kingdom called the Kingdom of Whispers, and I read another book, and they have the same kingdom. So ultimately, I conclude that humans just, are able to invent the same ideas, even if they're not related.
Yeah.
So have you ever read the book Why We Believe in Gods by J. Anderson Thompson?
Unfortunately not.
Highly recommend it. It's a very short book. It's a very interesting read, but basically it's an entire book about why it benefited human beings throughout the history of the world to believe in a god and to invent a god to believe in, and why it continues to benefit and appear in cultures that otherwise don't really communicate very often, obviously prior to the internet. But it's a very interesting look at all the ways that believing that a god exists and believing that a deity is watching you and is there for you and cares about you is actually directly linked to the survival of humans. And I highly recommend you read it, because it makes why religion is so prevalent make a lot of sense. And it also makes a lot of the rules that are found to be similar in so many religions. We're talking about even as far back as the Aztecs and the Incans and the Mayans, why some of those details match up and align with evangelical Christianity in the United States in 2024. But basically, human beings oftentimes need to believe in a deity in order to promote things like working together, sharing, in order to not feel isolated, in order for, human beings are pack animals in a sense. And it's very beneficial in terms of getting everybody to cooperate, getting everyone to behave, getting everyone to do things like hunt and share and gather that assist in the survival of the tribe, to avoid murder and killing other members of the tribe, which has always been the opposite of beneficial for their survival, and also for the survival of loneliness and isolation and things that can impact a human's mental health. And so I highly recommend reading it. But I think that is, in my opinion, mainly why you find religions across cultures, because there are some ways that will always benefit human beings, at least as a whole tribe, to believe that there's a deity as opposed to not believing in anything.
And just to add to that point, I also think part of it is, I mean, you kind of briefly touched upon this, but like, we are social creatures, and biologically, you know, we are made, like, we evolved because we have pattern recognition. And I think when we look at things, we try to find patterns in virtually everything we see. And so if you're out in the world, in the wilderness, and don't know anything about the world, you'll see the stars, you'll see the sky, and you'll make up some sort of explanation, which often is God in the absence of evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole thing of emotion and all these things came up, and because of the way we work together, because of the way our brains work, because of that pattern recognition that you mentioned, because of the questions we were asking about the world. For me, the answer to this question is, when we get these people who are saying, well, it's been proven that we're all prone to believe in a God, so therefore God must exist. That doesn't answer why all these God claims are so very, very different, and some of them aren't even the God claim itself that might be present in that belief system might not even be the central part of that belief system. And we see this in things like Buddhism, where it seeks to answer those big questions, and there are gods in the kind of original scriptures, but those gods take a kind of sidestep to what is actually important in that belief system. So it's all well and good saying, well, all this proves is that we are prone to believing things which aren't true for the sake of community, for the sake of how we understand the world around us. It doesn't prove that any gods at all, never mind a particular one, exists.
Yeah, I another small anecdote, but I remember when I was a kid, I was probably around 9 years old. I invented my own mythology, and it was not based on anything. It was just like things I imagined, and eventually I just kind of ended up believing it. And then over time I realized, well, this is stupid. So, yeah.
And that's how religion works. That's how it happens.
Yep.
Yeah. Right, we'll let you go. Thanks for calling. So give us a call back with your other little question you had, because we have got quite a few callers on the line.
Yes.
But feel free to call us back, and we'll go into that then. But thank you very much for your call.
Thanks, Vitaly. We appreciate you.